time, almost every family in Britain has spent their time, and the television and radio and pundits have spent their time arguing about this question of identity and of the European Union. The consequence of that is that, yes, when you argue about the rights and interests of the working classes of society, you're ignored, because people say, well, that's not the issue we're discussing. The big issue in Britain is, do you leave or do you remain in the European Union? Yeah. And therefore we are stuck between a pillar and a hard place. I don't deny that. But in order to escape from that situation, given the correlation of forces in the Labour Party and society, I believe Jeremy Corbyn is correct to sit back and say, let the Tories tear themselves apart. It's not our job to save Theresa May, and it's not our job to save Rees-Mogg.
Is it going past Conservative Labour? Isn't it going to what we need as a country? And you say that it's like a binary.
What do you mean by a country?
Well, we should they all be putting in to the benefit for our country.
The problem is
not for fighting against the left and the right, which you were saying it shouldn't be binary. There should be a mix up between it all. And also, when you said
that's not what
binary,
I said the binary is the division.
Yeah,
I said the binary is the division between leaving the European Union or remaining in the European Union.
What parts you want to leave from, and what parts are good of the EU. It's not just a leave or stay.
Well, that's fair enough. I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with it. Everybody in the world, everybody in Britain would like to say that I'd like to take the best bits of membership of the European Union. And what the definition of that is a subjective or political choice.
But that's not what people voted for. That's not what people voted for. When people voted to leave, they voted to leave the single market, the customs union.
I didn't say that is what people voted for. It is what people voted for in this respect. But people weren't given a choice. It's not true to... No, it is not true to say... Hang on. It is not true to say that people voted on the customs union. They didn't.
They did.
They voted on membership of the European Union.
Yeah.
Yes or no? There was no deal involved.
Was there detail?
This is why you should have another one.
I am not arguing that there should have been detail. I'm just saying there was no detail.
There was no detail in the first place of why we're in the first place.
What you asked, what the gentleman here asked was slightly different.
What about all the story, the bullshit story they sold to you to get you to vote leave? Okay. Well, now you know it's not the truth about the...
What the gentleman here was asking was a different question, though. You intervened because you assumed it was question time.
So let's say the Bank of England, the Treasury, what they say would happen after.
Do you want to speak at least to the meeting?
Yeah, of course.
Or else hold separately?
So the Treasury said, if there was a leave vote, if we were successful, there would be a recession immediately. There would be job losses.
I don't care what they said.
There would be economic stagnation.
What about it?
None of it happened.
We've grown 5.4%.
What about it?
Well, the economy's
No, but I'm not defending that.
So
I don't know what you're arguing
there's
about.
more people in jobs than there ever have been. We
What
haven't
is
had
the
our
argument?
contract. Yeah, there's more people in jobs.
What is the argument? Sorry, mate. Excuse me. What is the argument with what I was responding to him? What is your intervention?
I was responding to him, but you were saying...
Listen.
I was
This is
responding
not.
to you and leave and
This
remain.
is not.
Leave means leave, as in not member of the customs union, not member of the single market, not ruled by the European Court of Justice.
Did you hear what I said?
We didn't have the detail. We didn't have the detail.
What I said was.
I had the details.
I didn't have the details
yourself.
Exactly, that's why I voted to remain, not leave. Because I didn't have any detail.
So what about Project
I
Fear?
said.
Did we have a recession? Did we have a recession?
No, because we've technically not left yet.
Were there job losses?
Do you want a people's vote?
Sorry. What I said was.
Immediately after the vote, we would have a recession.
No, it won't be. There'll be a recession.
But what if there is?
Okay, so how much?
They said there'll be a recession post-Brexit.
You see, the gentleman here is engaged, and I understood this. One of the reasons I've avoided this discussion at Speaker's Corner is because I've had it at home, I've had it in my environment, and I know it goes nowhere. And you watch it on telly, and everyone's got their two pence to add, and their 2 pence to add leads them to a heated argument with their next door neighbour, and they're arguing on terms entirely decided by the establishment. That's the truth of that. Because whether the gentleman here is arguing, leave said leave, there was no detail, fair enough. The gentleman, he didn't ask me that though. What he asked was,
Yeah, but the
what is
detail on the
good?
Remain side was a lie. They
And
said there
one
were going to
second,
be
you've
job
been
losses, there was going to be an
intervening,
immediate recession, there was going to be an
Did I
emergency
argue
budget,
that?
and there haven't been
Did
any of
I?
those things.
But you're
The
standing in
economy
front
has
of
grown
me.
5.4%.
You're standing in
More
front of
people in
me.
work than there
What
ever
about
have
the
been.
fall in
There's
the
no
pound?
recession.
There you go.
You are standing in front
I
of
don't know
me.
what you're talking
Who
about.
are you arguing against?
Remainers.
But am I a Remainer?
I don't know.
Exactly, you don't know.
You're on the
You
fence.
don't know. But you've been speaking for 10 minutes, having come to the meeting and had a go at me
I didn't have a go
about
at you. I'm
something
just
I
saying,
never
make sure that you
advocated.
get your facts straight.
Sorry?
I'm just making sure you get your facts straight. Leave
But you
means
didn't
leave.
know what the argument was about to
Yeah,
have
but
the
you were
facts
talking
about.
being in the best bits of the European Union.
No, the
That's not what
gentleman here
people voted to
asked
leave
me.
voted.
No, that's not what the argument was about.
No, but that's the point
He
that he
asked
made, that we
me.
can stay with the
No,
best
no,
bits, but
he
that's not
asked me. Let me explain what it was.
Okay.
He asked me, are there not good things about membership of the European Union? And I mentioned a few.
Yeah.
And I said it depends who you are, which ones you think are good. Right?
subjective.
Now, yes, subjective.
Yeah.
That's why the entire discussion is at such a low intellectual level. But that's the level that we're at in Britain. Because people are stuck into the binary division.
Just blaming both sides, shouting.
I am blaming both
No, I'm not
sides.
saying you are. I'm just saying they're going back.
I
and
am
forth and they're
blaming
not
both
actually doing their
sides.
own research.
Yes, not because it's about research, but
Yeah.
because the primary issue is a misunderstanding of society we live in.
Yeah.
The discussion, someone turned around and said, I think it was the guy who was there a minute ago, he said, oh yeah, but this is about what our country does. As if the Leave voters or the Remain voters, whether we leave or remain, have any say about what happens in our country.
We should leave.
Why?
That's
Because it
right.
was
The
a
gentleman here
democratic-
says.
All right, okay.
You're the only. Most people who voted to leave, they don't actually know what they voted
How
for.
do you know that?
Well,
Because I've spoken to
my
loads
friend,
of
my friend,
No,
my
you've
friend.
spoken to loads, so you've got anecdotal evidence to support this
My friend.
spurious claim that you're making.
The argument that you will have
They didn't know
as
what
a
they were voting
consequence
You
of
didn't know what
leaving the
you were voting
European
for either.
Union.
You were voting.
We want to hear the speaker, please.
He keeps poking at me.
No,
It's
you
like,
began.
what's wrong with
You
You're
began
the-
over there, then wandered over here to engage in discussion with him.
Yeah, I'm allowed to
Because
engage in discussion.
you
What-
are,
you speak
you
for sport,
are,
what do you
but
think of it?
ideally, given the fact that I'm speaking on a platform
Yes.
and have been doing so for 32 years,
Congratulations.
if you wish to engage in the debate which is going on in this meeting, rather than the debate which is going just on television,
Yes.
right, in which I understand you feel frustrated because you don't get a role in that debate. And that's the very nature of politics in Britain, is that you don't actually have a say, and the idea that they've been proposing is they say, well, this is the biggest exercise in democracy in British history. And don't forget, Britain is supposed to be the citadel
That's not necessarily
of world
true.
democracy.
There was a general
And
election,
so,
I can't remember
hang
the
on,
turnout.
no, the biggest
No,
participation.
there was a larger turnout in the, I think it was like...
No, there
79.
wasn't
No,
a
there
larger
was, there was.
turnout.
Numerically, there was.
I'm sorry, it'll only take you 1 second to check that on your phone. But let's leave that aside
Take me longer than a second
until
to
you've
check.
done that. Let's leave that aside. The question is, that is how the issue is posed. We had a huge vote involving millions of people in Britain to decide what happens in this country. That's the argument as it's posed by Theresa May. That's what she's arguing. And the Conservative Party as a whole are arguing.
And should we respect that
Now-
decision?
Sorry?
Should we respect that decision going into the
I have
election?
said since the beginning of this meeting and since the time of the referendum itself that I respect the decision that people took. I've
some
said that
people-
all along.
I know some people
It took you a
clearly
while
don't
to
know.
get to that question though, didn't it?
Just wondering, because there are people here.
I don't
They
care
think
whether
we
there are
should
people
respect
here.
that
I'm
decision.
speaking on a platform.
I know.
Right?
And I've
Of course
seen
there are
people
people. Of
here.
course there are people here who argued to remain. There are people here who argue to leave, like yourself. Good on you. The problem is, both of them, those who argue to remain and those who argue to leave, are utterly and completely impotent. Utterly and completely impotent. Now, yes, I do know what the definition of impotence is. Theresa May, take for example. She's the Prime Minister of the country. And yet, she's utterly and completely impotent. So why do you think that you or that he have a bigger say in this?
because I think that if you had somebody who was, you know, a Leave voter, for example, that was in charge of
Yeah, but you don't
negotiating-
have the parliamentary arithmetic for that.
For a Leave mandate, but that's because she called a general election. She had a majority.
Who do you have
and
to
then she
do
called a
that?
general election.
Who
She's
do
a
you
Remainer.
have who could do that? Name me one member of parliament who could do that. Huh?
David.
He was the
But
negotiator.
you know damn well,
Yeah, I know.
as everybody else knows.
It's like me quitting my job and then going back to
I
my
mean, you've obviously followed the news
You have no
assiduously.
one.
You've obviously followed the news assiduously about Leave and Remain. You've obviously followed the debates for the last 2 years. Oh, you're not interested in
being
discussion,
a
huh?
celebrity and selling books in his column in the fucking Telegraph. He's not interested in leaving the country.
You're not interested in discussion.
No, I am, always.
Okay, so what did I say?
I was just arguing about Boris Johnson.
What did I say to you in response to what you said?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Right. So the issue was,
In all honesty.
I said, if the Prime Minister of the country is utterly impotent
Yeah.
in relation to the Leave or Remain,
Leader of the opposition should do something.
he's calling for a general election.
He's
Oh, how is that going to help things?
Oh, that changes everything.
It's tactical.
How loudly has he called for one?
What else do
He will,
what
he
else
will.
do you expect him to do?
Table of motion of no confidence in House of Commons.
Yes, in order to get a general election.
When's he going to do that?
Not in order to lose the vote.
Can you text me when he does it?
Well, my friend, what you want, that's a different issue. As opposed to the gentleman here, what you want is another referendum.
No, chaos.
No, what you want is another referendum where even more people turn out to make another impotent vote.
And then another one.
Yes.
Yeah, and then another one.
Best of three.
I know that's your position.
I want endless referendums. I'm
Well,
addicted.
no, you simply want to remain in the European
enjoyed the
Union.
last one so much.
Because you believe the world will collapse if we leave the European Union.
No, if
We
we
should
won the
settle
next
it
one,
with a
I'd
game
switch
of
sides
rock,
and
paper,
argue for
scissors.
another one.
We should settle it with a game of rock, paper, scissors.
No, the issue is what you said earlier on. You said someone
May
needs to
versus
do it.
Joker.
Well, who's going to do it? Then you said David Davis. A huge round of applause in the audience burst out. Yes, we're all begging and baying for David Davis to save the world. But it's simply not going to happen, is it? So what you actually have is
It's very
an
easy for you to
utter
stand
and
there and sit
complete
on the fence and not actually
political paralysis in British society.
What's
That
your
is the
realistic
reality of what
solution?
you've got.
This is the
You keep going on about
You're
saying
just sitting on
both
the
sides
fence.
are wrong.
You
You're
don't have
saying
to make a decision.
Leavers are wrong, Remainers are wrong. So what's your
I
realistic
am saying
solution
the
that you bring to the
belief.
table?
I am saying the belief that you actually have fundamental control over the process happening in your country or in the European Union is false. We do not control the political process or the
So you're
economic
opposed-
process.
So you're opposed to the whole process
I'm
itself.
trying to explain to you what my view is.
I'm trying to understand your view.
your own
Well, you're
time
not
you
making a
wasted.
great deal of
Still
effort. As soon as I finish one sentence, you want a
All I can see is
clarification.
you're just sitting on the fence. You won't
I'm
actually
not
make
sitting
a
on the
decision.
fence at all.
He's not sitting on the bench. he's
Honestly,
standing
I've
on a
stood here for half an hour. I still don't know what your position is.
On relation to what?
Brexit.
You don't have one.
I'm quite clear.
what's
I
Brexit?
want to see British society
You're gonna use
controlled and run by the people rather than run by the interests of big business. I want to see Europe controlled and run by the people. I want to see the world controlled and run by the people. And the only method to achieve that is by a fundamental transformation in the balance of wealth and power in society from the wealthy to the majority, which means the following: public ownership of the commanding heights of the economy, of the banks and major
Theresa May has
industries.
been publicly owned.
And unless you have such a transformation in the balance of power, the living standards and conditions of the masses will not improve. However, if you do want to improve the living standards and conditions of the masses, we have clear indications as to how that is possible. One is, for example, one second, I'll take you next. One is,
Can I be taken
if you
first?
look across to France at what happened over the last few weeks, within a few days of protesting, in fact 4 weeks of protesting, French protesters managed to force an intransigent, utterly immovable
very
president
handsome.
to concede to the demands of the people. They gave wage increases, They promised changes to the conditions of the people in relation to minimum wages, in relation to approaches to workplace rights, workers' conditions, and so on. That is a big improvement. It's simply in a matter of weeks because of protest on the streets.
The French didn't know what they were
Protest
protesting
on the
for.
streets, if that is backed by parliamentary change, can also facilitate improvements in the legislative framework in society. That means a Labour government would be able to introduce changes in British society to improve the wages, improve the housing, improve the living standards of the
The way in
people.
which Jeremy Corbyn's made an about from being a lead.
It's nonsense. That's not a realistic option.
It's not even a plan.
25%
Jeremy Corbyn made a
His
complete...
advisors on, they're on £100,000. So what happened in Soviet Russia is happening with corporates. The privilege
It's hardly the same situation. I understand your concern. I accept your concern. I do not believe there's the slightest bit of Stalinism.
in history where communism has led to a privileged class basically dominating the minority, the majority. One example from history where there hasn't been a privileged class.
My friend,
Can I ask a question?
there are, in the history of socialism, various strands of socialism.
Of course.
One of the strands that, for example, you have mistaken for a Stalinist strand is the social democratic strand. The social democratic strand has held power in governments in Sweden, Germany,
They've got some of the
France,
most deregulated
Spain,
markets in the
Italy.
world.
Sorry?
They've got deregulation in the markets. They've got vast oil
But you
reserves.
asked me the question. When was a socialist
No, I
government?
said communist.
You're not allowed to deviate
But you were
from the
talking
question,
about the
you
Labour
obviously have
Party.
to be very
I
binary
said
in your
communist.
But you were talking about the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about?
So
The Labour Party has never been run by
Heads up,
communists.
you can only respond directly to the question. If you deviate in any way, then he'll
No,
say you don't
that
know.
wasn't the question he asked. If you want to change the
I
question,
know,
fine.
I know.
But it was when you started
I
questioning,
wanted to ask
you
you a
made
question.
the initial assumption, which was utterly false, about what my point of view was, and then you
I thought
jumped
I was
for
next
10
and this chap
minutes.
was next.
You blabbered on for
I
10
wasn't
minutes,
blabbering, I was
assuming
speaking.
that my position was the one you wanted to attack.
You won't hear me.
You're generating someone, obviously your argument is flawed.
Nationalisation in the streets, you state. The problem, what if the even rich people don't want to give up their assets? What do we do with them?
Has it ever occurred to you that perhaps they're the right people to be controlling them? Hierarchies exist in all sorts of
The gentleman here
different manners.
has a very important
This
question.
whole idea of communism just doesn't
Try and
work.
respond to it. I know you've got a very smart point of view and you're very well educated, but the gentleman here has just posed a question.
Okay.
Because you can answer that question, you can't answer his question. Answer his
I don't know what his question was. What was
You
it?
won't hear me out.
What was his
I
question?
wanted to ask you a question when you were
What
talking
was your
about...
question?
Shut up and listen to him.
Well, you tell me what his question was.
I wasn't here.
So you don't know what you're talking about. So I'm going to respond to
You
him.
are not here and you don't know
You're
what is his
simply
question.
backing him up.
I just asked you a
Back him
Shut
up in asking his question. When one is he hasn't asked a question, two is you didn't hear it. What are you talking about?
Your argument,
Just don't like me. Fair enough.
I
But
don't
don't
know you,
talk
I've
shit
just
to
turned
me.
up. Your
Exactly.
argument
What about?
has become diluted because you are becoming personal. Your argument is diluted. Agreed. You will not listen.
Let him answer.
I'm trying to answer him.
Well, answer him then.
The gentleman here said,
His argument is diluted. The decorum of the debate is completely
I
lost.
thought I was going to answer him.
Answer his
My
question.
friend, I've been speaking 32 years. Perhaps you can tell me your experience.
But that doesn't mean anything. You know that doesn't mean anything.
It means something to me.
Maybe here it
I'm
doesn't.
brave myself to tell you my
The gentleman here asked,
ignorant person.
the gentleman here asked,
Why not? Half the fun is well.
the gentleman here asked,
Otherwise you
won't
can't
the wealthy be opposed to a transfer in the balance of wealth and power? Yes, of course they will. Of course they will. Just the same as Remainers and Leavers militantly defend their position, so I believe I have a right to militantly defend the position
not make
that
any
regardless
decision
of
about
whether the wealthy would like to hand over their wealth and power, regardless of whether the banks would like to be nationalised,
communism
regardless
doesn't
of whether
fucking work.
landlords would like to see rents controlled, regardless of whether companies that keep empty buildings empty all over Britain would like to have their properties seized, still we should be able and willing to do those things, regardless of whether they like it or not. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Who are you, the judge? Are you God? Are you deciding
I'm
that you can just
advocating
seize the
a
property?
policy. I'm advocating a policy.
You run the judge everyone yourself. You're basically...
I can advocate whatever policy I like.
You can. What if you are saying that
My
you want
friend,
the judge?
What do you think will happen?
You can just remove
I'm
their
saying
property.
the
What do you
sort.
think will happen?
I didn't say anything of the sort.
Answer.
In
What
Britain.
do you think will
In
happen?
Britain.
What will happen?
If you went around and you seized
What will
everybody,
happen?
I'm going to answer.
Do you advocate rent control?
Sorry?
Do you advocate rent
Of
control?
course I advocate rent control.
What's happened every other time rent controls have been instituted?
he also advocates seizing of
Another
assets
time.
from the welfare.
In Germany, in Britain,
No, rent control.
we've had rent control in Britain. We've had rent control in Britain.
What happened?
The government under Margaret Thatcher abolished it.
And what happened under rent
And rents went
What happened to the
skyrocketing.
quality of accommodation?
Sorry?
What happens to the quality of accommodation under rent control?
My friend, I don't know if you where you've been,
I'm sure he's
but
not
in the,
I asked a question, can you answer it, please?
I'm answering your question.
Please, guys.
I don't know where
Answer
you've
it
been.
directly, sir.
I am answering you directly, sir. I don't know where you've been,
I've been here.
but in case you didn't bother to find out,
Here 32 years.
Britain has the worst quality housing stock, rented housing stock, in the whole of Europe. Britain has the worst quality housing. Check it on the internet.
Your rhetoric is abusive. Your rhetoric is flawed. Your rhetoric has become abusive because your
Because I don't agree
ideology.
with him.
No, your
He
rhetoric's
wasn't abusive. He wasn't
abusive.
abusive. He's a very fine, very kind man.
I
I mean, he's wrong about almost
Being
everything.
polite all the time. I'm speaking at Speaker's Corner.
Do your best.
Statement about housing. That's just statement about housing.
That's not how he felt.
Why is my statement about housing rubbish?
Because it's definitely not the worst in Europe. It's the worst place. Go to
Check on the
Romania, go to
internet.
Eastern
Check
Europe.
on the internet.
I'm not.
You're making
Check
the
in your
statement to
pocket.
prove
Do
your
a
I
search.
can find anything.
We can all get information to prove what we say.
Well, this is a pan-European study. I'm not responsible for the study. So yes, if there are flaws in the study, I'm not responsible.
There he is. He won't take responsibility once again.
I can't be
No
responsible
leave,
for a
no
study.
remain. I didn't do the study. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's not what I said. I think I know what I'm talking about. I just don't agree with you.
Why don't you?
You're saying
You won't
you
even
know
listen to
what
me. How do
you're
you know if
talking
you don't
about.
agree with me?
You don't agree with me? Well, that's fair enough.
Fair enough, fair enough. If the study might be flawed, fair enough. That's a
Of course, any
possibility.
study can be
It's a
flawed.
possibility. It's a possibility. But
Highly,
still,
highly likely.
I think it's a very big thing to say
Well-
that Britain has the worst housing, because Britain is far from being the poorest country in Europe. And
It's
if
not
you
about
think
whether you're
about
the
it,
poorest country in
it has a
Europe.
lot to do
It's
with
about how the housing stock
him
has
finish.
been allowed to run
Let
down.
him finish.
I was asked a specific
Let
question.
him finish.
The question was
Let
about
him
rent
finish.
controls. The rent control issue I pointed out was abolished under Margaret Thatcher. I remember calling for the rent officer to come and impose rent control in the building I lived in. He came round, the rent was £20 a week, he imposed £10 a week, back in 1983.
Right, let
I
him
remember
finish.
that. In Germany, there are rent controls. The housing stock is of a far superior quality in Germany than it is in Britain.
Move
That
to
does
Germany,
not
then.
mean
Move to
that
Germany.
there's a direct...
Move to Germany.
Childish
No,
argument.
it's not a
That
childish
does not
argument.
mean there's a
Your
direct
rhetoric is
correlation
childish. Your
between
rhetoric
rent
is
control
childish.
and the quality of
Quantify what you're
housing.
saying.
But it does mean that the argument that rent control...
We're 10th. Look.
10.
10. It's worse in Austria. In Ireland.
Austria,
In Norway.
sorry,
Finland.
the quality of
Netherlands.
housing stock is in Austria.
Oh, no, the
Show me the
internet.
study.
Show
Show
me
me the study.
Is that
Show
No,
me
I'm
the
not
study.
showing it. Go Google it yourself.
Show me the study.
I can
Show
see
me the
it.
study.
I can see it.
Show me what reference it is.
No, no, I can see it. He
That's
doesn't want to show
independent.
you. I
Google
can
it.
see
Show me
it.
the reference.
Independent.
Show me
I'm not giving you my phone.
just for a second.
No, sorry about
No, your company's for my stealing. Who knows?
that. I'll show it to everyone. Look.
What is the reference?
take your phone
What
and
is
make
the
it
article?
Number 10.
What is the
You said
article?
he'll give it back to the
What
poor.
is the article?
It's not from his source.
No, 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 no.
Oh, yeah.
No, no, no.
Source.
So agree with
Yeah,
what he's saying, so
cited it.
No,
therefore
no,
he
it's the wrong
disregards
source.
it.
It doesn't agree with you. Wrong source.
What's the article?
The rhetoric is
Albert, what's
abusive.
the
The
article?
man is abusive.
about this?
The man is argumentative.
date?
The man
It's
is
about housing.
abusive. The man has
What's the
lost.
date?
It's about
and the source.
housing.
It's got worse. It's got worse.
And
You've gone
source.
from
That's all I want to know.
April 2016.
I know in the last one. in the
April
last
what?
2 years.
April 2016.
April what? 2016.
28. Why does that matter?
Search for it.
Sorry.
Check.
Go on. 28th of April 2016. Do you want a time?
Fair enough.
20 what?
16.
What's the title of the article?
The man at Speaker's Corner.
70 European countries ranked by standard of living, which is housing.
Standard of living.
And housing.
See?
Housing.
Standard of living.
And housing.
Talking about living.
Why cut him off before you hear the whole name
That's
of
not
the
what the
article?
article's about, though, is it?
Yes, it is.
The article's not about the standard of
Doesn't agree
housing.
with
That's
it.
very spurious.
Rhetoric.
That's very spurious.
I happen to have.
Let's listen. Worse than Eastern European countries.
Okay, never mind. I'll do the search and put it up for you. All right? Just quickly, I'll do the search, put up an article that deals with the issue we've just been discussing.
So
Rather
it
than
supports
that
your
different-
argument, nobody else's.
I'm not saying the article will be comprehensively correct on everything. I will tell you what the article is. I will cite it, refer to you,
Yes.
and you can then check yourselves.
Okay.
What I just got for the gentleman here was an article about a totally different subject, claiming that he'd proven his case.
Liar!
That's the only thing.
Liar.
Liar!
Full of shit.
Totally different. Stop naming.
It was about housing and living.
You said it's about.
Out of 17
Just have a look.
richest countries in Europe, and we were 10th. There was 9 other countries worse than
Yes,
this country.
well, you can
It's,
have
it's
a good
total
quality of life
nonsense
and
what
live
you're
in
saying
a
about housing being the worst in Europe. It's not true.
So you're saying
It's, housing worse than Albania, Romania.
Yeah, exactly.
You've not been
The experts keep you wrong, I
you've
don't
not
know.
been to Eastern Europe.
you've been to
You've
Ukraine?
been to Eastern Europe. You've been to
really
parts
Now
of
there's
you've been
there's
to parts of
relevant
Ukraine.
point there. Probably the study I referred to was about Western Europe. Probably you're right.
Oh,
I see.
here
I'll
we
give you a
go.
qualification.
What about
I'm
Northern
accepting
Europe?
that.
What about
Well,
Northern
you
Europe?
forgot the Western bit, didn't you?
What about South? What about the the bit of Italy?
Western
What
Europe,
about that
Western
part? What's it
Europeans
like
have
there?
very high standards of living to begin with. So being the worst between them is not actually
Yeah.
that bad.
What's it like in Corsica? Does
It's
that
actually
count?
pretty good.
When
I
you
didn't say
consider
every
when you
area of
consider
every
Germany's the
country's
biggest
area.
economy in Europe.
I'm trying to find the article. You can wait for a couple of seconds.
I can, yeah,
Not such a big
absolutely,
deal.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's
Well, I think we know that. You just forgot to say Western Europe.
It could be that, but even if it was Western Europe, we adequate to deal
Well,
with.
it's not that bad, then, is it? We're talking about Germany, France.
I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty desirable country.
We're not talking about third world countries here. But when you say Europe, you're including Romania. No disrespect to Romania, Albania, and these countries. Their housing state's not better than UK. So what you're saying is
True. That's why I've just qualified what I said.
Okay, may I ask you a question on
You
taxation?
may indeed, while we're still at it.
Okay, if somebody told you that 20% corporation tax give more money to the state than 30% corporation tax, would you choose the 20% over the 30%? Or are you so widely doctrinal about things?
It
you
depends
just want the tax
what
to be the same?
it depends what corporations you're planning to. It depends what corporations you're planning to tax.
But do you look at this from a rational point of view or an ideological, envious point of view?
I look at it from a rational point of
Exactly.
view.
So therefore, you'd lower it if you wanted to boost revenue in order to have more money from public services.
If that were the case, I would be prepared to lower
So why do you want to
corporation
raise-
tax
why do you want
on
to
certain
raise-
sectors.
You know, have you heard of an economic model
However,
called the Laffer curve?
however, what
you know
I'm
what the Laffer
arguing
curve
is
is?
something slightly different. I'm not arguing for allowing the private ownership of all the major companies.
wasn't asking
And
that. I was
no,
asking
but
if you
I'm
know
just
what the Laffer
stating
curve
what
is.
I'm
It's about-
arguing. I'm sorry that I'm clarifying what I'm arguing rather than what you're
Just
arguing.
moving on from
I don't
this
know
point,
what you're
talking
arguing.
about
That's
collection of
why.
tax, because you won't
gentleman
listen
here
to me.
asked me.
He was asking about tax, and so I was just
He asked
moving
me
on
about
from his point.
corporation tax, and were it lower, and that was shown to bring higher revenues that could be spent on public services, would I support such a thing? And I gave a qualified yes, provided, and this is the proviso I'm adding,
It's an economic model.
provide.
It's called the Laffer curve.
So
There you
can I
go.
finish?
Yeah, go for it.
Providing the dominant sectors of the economy are in public hands.
What are the dominant sectors of the economy?
By that I mean the largest 150 companies,
What do they all
including the banks, insurance companies and so on.
What, so you say
And
the
in
banks
that
should be owned
way,
by people?
you would have sufficient resources to plan the development of the economy
Yeah.
and thereby to facilitate yes, even private sector development, alongside a general planned development of the productive potential
So
of the
if
country.
I could ask a question to everybody that's here, who here, if you put your hand up, who here thinks that if put in charge of a bank, they could run it efficiently? Anybody?
That's a good question.
My friend,
Do you run a bank?
my
Do you run a
friend,
bank?
did I say,
No.
did I say that anyone here should be put in charge of a bank?
People that work for banks are the best qualified
Public
to run banks.
ownership
You're saying
does
that
not
I'm best
mean,
qualified to do my
public
job.
ownership does not mean or imply that every person in this meeting would become the bank manager.
So the government owns
Since
it
when has
instead?
public ownership meant that? The government, for example,
So the
which has
government
majority stakes.
So the government
in
that we've got that
three
can't even
key
negotiate
bank-
a Brexit deal
the
should be in
government
charge of a
took-
business.
The government took majority stakes in 3 key banks in Britain, and yet they did not change the managerial structure.
they
So
did.
it is not automatic
they
that
did.
a publicly owned bank
they did
has
change the management structure.
has a
That's just
purge
not
of its general management.
So who was in
It
charge
could
of...
be that
So
you
who was
should
in
have a
charge of
purge.
RBS in 2008?
It could be that you should have a purge.
Who was in charge
but
of
the
RBS?
assumption that
Who was
you
in charge
made,
of RBS in
the
2008?
assumption that you made,
Answer the
in order to
fucking
mock
question.
my argument,
You won't listen
I'm
to anything
answering
that I
what
say.
you
You
said.
said that there wasn't a change in
Instead
management.
of
There was.
accepting that I answer what you say, you've decided to move the goalpost from your
No, I'm
original
not moving the
argument,
goalpost. I'm saying,
which
okay, so we're
was
talking
that
about
if
banking.
I
We're
argue,
talking about banking.
if I argued for public ownership of the banks,
Who was in charge?
you said
Who was in
that
charge of RBS
means
in 2008?
anybody here will run the bank.
Who was in charge of RBS
Right?
in 2008?
I don't know.
Fred Goodwin. Who was in charge of RBS in 2009?
But it was particularly
Stephen Hester.
rampant.
So you said there wasn't
That's
a change
one
in management
person.
when it was nationalised.
One
That's just not
person.
true.
It's not only one
Yeah, but that's
person
across
runs
the
a bank,
board.
my friend.
Well, I think when you put somebody in charge of a bank, the chief executive is the chief
Not
executive.
only one
They do
person.
run
My
that bank.
argument, however, was to point out
So how many people lost
that
their job in
public
RBS
ownership
in
of the
08 and
banks
09?
does not mean either that Goodwin needs to be in charge or that someone in this audience needs to be in charge. You have technical competence. You have the needs and planning of the government at of the day. You have the needs and planning and skills developed inside the business, and therefore the decision process is a process that would not be decided by you or I in all likelihood. Did I say that it would be?
Okay,
No.
so allow me to make my
So
point.
then,
No,
hang
allow me
on,
to
hang
answer.
on.
No, allow me to
Therefore,
answer
the argument is spurious to say that because there is public ownership of banks, that therefore banks will be run by a numbskull who has no education and knowledge about it, which is what you're implying my argument was.
Don't try and
It's
make
a
a straw,
false
don't try and make a
implication.
straw man out of me. Don't
That's
try and
what
tell me
you
what
did.
that's not what
That's what you
That's
did.
not what I
Yeah,
said.
you said that everybody here
Do you know what that is?
then
In
run
debating,
the
you're
bank.
trying to make a straw
You
man
said
out of me.
if
That's what
you
I'm
did,
telling
my
you.
friend.
That's
runs
not what I
the
said.
That
bank.
is what
That's
you
what
did.
said.
When I said public ownership of the banks,
Okay, so let me
you
ask you a
stopped.
question.
Hang on.
No, no,
You
let me ask you a
said.
question. You
You
won't
then
actually
said.
listen to anything that I
"Well,
say."
here could run the bank. That's what
Yeah.
you said.
Yeah.
Right. So don't tell me about
So
straw
if you
dog.
nationalise,
About straw.
so if you, okay, straw man,
Dogs.
straw man. So if you nationalise a bank, and you're not going to make any changes to the staff, so you're going to make no fundamental changes whatsoever between the people.
I
who
didn't
work
say
there
that
before.
either.
I know, I'm asking you a question.
You
I
said
didn't say that you said
when
that.
you
I
take
asked
into
you a
public
question,
ownership-
and you can answer the
I
question.
didn't say that.
Listen, hear me out.
Right.
So there are no fundamental changes in staff.
I
when
didn't
it's
say
private-
that.
I'm asking you a question.
There will be fundamental
Zip
changes. in
it.
staff.
I'll tell you when you can
I don't know
answer.
what they will be.
Zip it, okay? No
Right.
changes. If there are no changes,
But I'm not going to advocate that.
Okay, guys,
Well,
let
hear
him
me
answer.
out.
Let him interrupt each other. Let
I'm
each other
asking
speak.
you a
Let
question.
each other speak. Don't,
If
don't.
there are no fundamental changes in staff when it's privately owned and then it's nationalised, what is the point of it being nationalised versus it being privately owned? Because the staff are the same, so the actions will be the same, so the end product will be the same. So you're effectively saying that profit should be shared to the
Go
government
over there,
and not
the
to...
shop over there. If you invest in that shop
There's not a
to
shop over
produce
there.
souvenirs,
not.
and you invest in that shop
It's a
to
cafe,
produce
they don't sell
food,
souvenirs.
it's a shop. If you invest in that, I mean, this is the dictionary definition of a pedant,
Okay.
right? That's what it is.
And you're the dictionary definition of a Jobson.
What?
Jobson.
Exactly, you don't even know what that is.
I don't know what it is. I didn't even hear it.
It's a peasant of low intellect.
I mean, I've got a doctorate.
Okay.
It might be a bad thing to have, but I have a doctorate.
You should be in charge of the NHS. You could probably run it better than the
It's
people
a
that are running it now,
doctorate.
right?
I've got a doctor of medicine.
Okay.
A doctorate
Okay, what do you have a doctorate in?
in Chinese political economy.
Really?
Knew it.
Well,
Chairman
if
Mao.
in that shop,
It's a cafe.
that makes me Chairman Mao, doesn't it? So if I understand Chinese political, I'm Chairman Mao.
When did I say you're Chairman Mao? I just said Chairman Mao.
What's Chairman Mao got to do with
So
it?
you're saying that he's Chairman
If
Mao?
that shop,
That is what you said because you weren't
if
listening.
that
'cause you
shop,
won't listen to anything that I
if
said.
that shop
It's a cafe.
is run to sell sweets, or run to sell food,
Yep.
or run to sell souvenirs,
Yep.
it's got different objectives, methods of operating, sales pitches, and so on.
I don't think they think it's their
So,
sales pitch.
if a bank, even with the same people theoretically in charge, a theoretical proposition you posed to me, I didn't select it.
Okay.
Even in those circumstances, a bank can be made to do something different.
So we should tell them
Let me
what to
give
do.
you an example, just to piss you off.
So we let them
When
do their job, but tell them how to do their job.
when Lenin came to power in Russia,
Okay.
what he said was, we will not nationalize the large companies.
Okay.
Instead, we will tell the managers what they will do.
Yep.
And if they don't do it, we'll arrest them.
Okay.
So,
what's
in
the
that
difference?
way,
So you're
hiring
proposing
I
a
said,
police
I knew
state.
it would piss you off.
So are you proposing a police
I said
state?
I knew it would piss
That's
him
what
off.
he's doing. So you've got an
I'm merely
expert
pointing
running the
out-
bank.
You're a communist.
I am merely
You're
pointing
such
out.
a communist. It's
I'm just
unreal.
merely pointing out that there is no law that says
you're a communist.
because someone is in a
Talking about a
position,
police state.
a specific. I didn't advocate that. I merely said that's what they did in order to illustrate to you the flexibility that can exist, even with the same people in command. Let me give you another example, one that you'll like. When Leon Trotsky, when Leon Trotsky, you will like this one. I'm sure you'll repeat it to somebody else. When Leon Trotsky was in charge of the Red Army in Russia, in 1922, he met with Lenin, and Lenin said, I hear you've got too many Tsarist generals and officers inside the Red Army. Can't you purge them? And Trotsky said, do you know how many we've got? Officers and generals from the old order in the Red Army. And Lenin said, no, he said, oh, we've got 10,000. 10,000 from the old order. My friend, the point was that having been Tsarist officers for the Tsar of Russia and fought in the First World War to defend the nation and the Tsar under the control of the Bolsheviks,
take a walk around real quick.
they fought on behalf of the Bolshevik government.
See what else is happening.
So therefore the argument you're making
Peace to all the
from
viewers.
all representatives transposes the general structure.
Time to play.
And he said,
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. For all I know, I imagine God created giraffes and he's got a ratio of giraffes. Sorry? I don't know.
you don't believe in what Jesus Christ said you can do.
Adnan and Joseph. It's very good.
Criticize. When he talks about Islam, he uses the word insult. But when he talks about Judaism and Jewish people, he uses the word criticize.
Are you going to let me speak or are you going to
I will.
Okay, so stop performing and let me speak. Stop performing. So I said.
Do you want people to insult Jewish people? Is that what you want? By the way, are you a Jewish?
You have to
Are you
learn how to
Jewish?
debate.
Are
Stop
you
trying
Jewish?
to dominate the conversation.
By the way, are you Jewish?
Yes. Stop trying
You
to
are
do-
Jewish.
For the camera, I'm Jewish. Now let me answer.
Good.
So I believe I
Big
have
up Cover
every
Fresh
right
Tower.
to criticise.
My brother.
Insult or criticize?
Let me insult.
Insult. Good. You want people to insult the Jewish people?
No, religion. You not make me.
Okay,
Listen,
when you
stop,
insult-
Stop. Let me speak. You keep interrupting. You're very good at talking. You're not very good at listening.
I'm glad I'm good at
something. You're supposed to be a sheikh. They call you a sheikh.
I'm not a sheikh.
They're not a sheikh.
Let me clarify. I'm not a sheikh. I'm a milkshake, rather. Yeah, I agree with Steve there. For the first time in my life, I agree with Steve. I'm a milkshake, right?
So, Mr. Milton,
I love milkshake.
Especially the vanilla flavour.
But now we've done running around, let me just make a point.
Yes.
If somebody believes, we call it Brit Miller, circumcision, if somebody says that's a barbaric practice and it's primitive and it shouldn't be practiced, they have every right to say that. If they say people that practice this, which white people do, they're primitive people, they have every right to exercise that freedom of speech.
I agree.
So this
I agree.
This is Judaism.
That's criticism.
So this is the ideology.
That's criticism.
If somebody,
That's not insulting.
If somebody wants to insult my prophets, be it Musa, Moses, Moshe, they want to insult my prophets, they should be absolutely free to do that. My prophets.
Very good point.
Now my point is, can I make my point? What we initially got onto is what is freedom of speech. Freedom of speech becomes problematic when you insult violence. So if I tell everybody here to attack Steve because you're in the line of the camera, you're the star of the show. If I say we're all to attack him, that's illegal because it threatens his liberty.
Okay, let me understand your point clearly. Very good point. What's your name? Joseph. Yusuf has made a very good point that I believe religions can be criticized and people should have the right to do so. I agree with Yusuf or Joseph. I agree with him completely that people, scholars, individuals, the masses have the right to criticize other religions and deny those religions and talk about the religions. But Yusuf, do you also believe that people have the right to insult a people because of their religion?
Not the people. No one's talking about. This is the distinction you're not getting.
So our prophets not people.
No. Listen.
Our prophets not
living people today that are alive today. That's where it becomes problematic. Yeah. And even then, I believe we have the right.
So why do you draw this line between dead and alive? Why do you draw this line between dead and alive? Because people are people. Do you agree? Can I insult the dead Jewish people?
Yes, you can insult dead Jewish people.
No, I don't want to do
that. That's
fine,
that's your choice.
I don't want to do that.
But you have the right to do that in this country.
That's called anti-Semitism in this country, and it's
not.
No, it is called anti-Semitism.
Insulting dead Jews.
Yes. Insulting the Holocaust. Insulting the Holocaust victims is anti-Semitism. You don't know what you're talking about. You're doing a bad job representing your people.
You've just changed the goalpost.
Let me represent your people. I'm doing a better job.
You just changed the goalpost. You said you can't insult dead Jews. If someone wants to insult my grandfather who's Jewish, they're fine. They have the freedom to insult my dead grandfather.
You are speaking against your people now because it took a lot. It took the Jewish people. It took the Jewish people a lot of effort and struggle to pass laws against anti-Semitism.
What are you talking
about? Rightly so. Let me finish and you will understand what I mean. This man, who's a Jewish man, wants the people to now start insulting.
Look at me.
Into the eyes.
Look at the Jew. Look at the Jew.
Exactly. Did you hear that? The camera is more important than all of you.
Bollocks to that. Bollocks to that. This corner has not been here for 150 years for fucking cameras. So absolute bollocks to that last statement.
Shake hands on that as well.
So look at me.
Can you believe this? I'm actually agreeing with Steve today. Can you believe
What's this all about? We've got to go down and look positive towards Steve. What's this all about?
So Joseph is actually wrong in asserting that you can insult dead Jewish people. I believe
I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky.
I like that song, by the way. I use
It's haram. It's haram.
It's all too positive to me.
Without music, it's perfectly halal. Without music, it's perfectly halal. Okay,
that song is never halal.
Okay, coming back to freedom of speech. Joseph believes that it should be allowed to insult dead Jewish people. I believe no. I believe it shouldn't be allowed to insult any dead or living people. No one should be allowed to insult anyone because insults usually lead to violence.
Okay,
and let me finish my point. In civilized societies, which is what thankfully Britain is, freedom of speech. People should not be allowed, and these extremists nowadays who are talking about freedom of speech and don't know what it actually means.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. Let me explain what I mean.
Can I just
Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom to insult.
Speech.
I
You do
repeat.
not control my thoughts and my speech. You do not control my thoughts and speech. That is fundamental in Western society.
Can I finish my point? Can I finish my point? Can I finish my point without being heckled? Yeah, Rashid is fine.
Coming in a minute.
Is
the advert break coming up in a second? When's the advert?
Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech does not mean anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. It means to criticize religions, religious figures. You are perfectly in your right to criticize religious figures, religions, and people. No problem with that. Criticism and insult are two different things. We are for criticism. This is what's been happening throughout. Let me finish my point.
You spoke for a long time.
I'm finishing very soon, Joseph. I'm finishing very soon. Okay.
Finish yourself off quickly.
When it comes to freedom to insult, that has never been part of civilized societies. Some extremists nowadays, some fascists, they want to bring back uncivilized ideas into civilized societies where they want to insult people and their religions, which instigates violence, and we are thoroughly against such ideas.
Okay, now let me respond. So, you may have very sensitive feelings. You may be a snowflake. You may not like being triggered with nasty words, and that's you. But the difficulty with what you say is somebody has to determine what is an insult and what isn't an insult.
I agree.
And insults are subjective and personal. So if somebody were to say that I have a big nose or a disgusting beard, I might find that very hurtful. Somebody else might find that very funny and enjoy the banter. You can't legislate, thank you, you can't legislate for feelings. You can't legislate for subjective opinion. What you can legislate for is violence.
I understand.
And this is the freedom of speech. No, you spoke for a long time.
Sure, go ahead. No, he's right. Please do finish your point.
Just block this up with an advert.
Let's have a Kit Kat.
Freedom of speech hinges on being uncomfortable. There is freedom of speech needs to take us out of our comfort zone. Otherwise, it's not freedom of speech. It's just saying what everybody likes. And
I agree.
Okay, shake my hand. Shake my hand. Shake my hand. Shake my hand. He didn't say it.
I agree. I agree. 100%. What Joseph said there, I agree with it 100%. However, the details are far more interesting. If we apply, for example, you give an example of talking about someone's nose, someone's looks, okay, like the Nazis were doing to the Jewish people. They were drawing pictures of the Jewish people with big noses, with a figure of a Jewish man trying to overpower the world around the globe. Okay, these images, although can be seen as freedom of speech by some people, are extremely dangerous for societies, as we saw in Holocaust. Those images led to the Holocaust. Okay, let me finish my point. Okay, this is why we have to draw a line. A line has to be drawn. How far can we go with our criticism? When criticism turns into insult, when it turns into dehumanization, yes, I know these words. I can use them.
It ends up in a genocide if you draw people's noses.
When you start to dehumanize people, like the Daily Mail does to the Muslims, like the Nazi newspapers are doing to the Jews, then a line has to be drawn. It is no longer freedom of speech. It is anti-Semitism. It is Islamophobia, which should be illegal, and it is illegal, rightly so.
The difficulty with Speaker's Corner is nobody ever concedes any ground, and I will actually say there is some sense and some truth to what you're saying.
Thank you.
And I would go further. I would add to that.
I agree with Joseph.
First time.
So
second time.
One of the distinctions we have to make here is the UK has a tradition. Oh, you're getting his help. The UK The UK has a tradition of caricaturing people. If you pick up the newspapers, it's full of politicians with hook noses and gangly features, and it doesn't endanger any community.
Good.
And the point that you touched on was the endangerment of a vulnerable people, and I would agree. I think that is where there is, and I would say Islamophobia is real. Some people here will say it's not real if there's something to be worried. No, Islamophobia is real. People have prejudices against Muslims. Transphobia is real. Homophobia is real. And anti-Semitism.
It is, yes.
And we have to legislate to protect vulnerable communities.
Yes.
I agree with that.
We agree.
But Charlie Hebdo going too far? Was it going too far, Charlie Hebdo?
No, not in my opinion. And the thing is, this is the point I was going to come to.
That's a good point you raised.
So
Charlie Hebdo, we're going to talk about that now.
Charlie Hebdo is a great example. They have a tradition of ridiculing Christianity, caricaturing the Jesus, anti-clerical.
They weren't murdered for that.
And my point is, religion, God, prophets, they're all an idea. And what do I mean by that? They don't exist.
Okay.
Moses isn't stood in front of me. Muhammad isn't stood in front of you. It's all in our mind, and that we can use all the proofs we want to prove that. But I should be able to criticize and ridicule
Joseph,
your idea.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Charlie Hebdo. If Charlie Hebdo was to depict the Jewish people with big noses, with a Jewish man with a hat, what do you call it? Hanukkah or
Yarmulke.
Sorry,
Kippah is a better word. Kippah is a
yeah. With a hat, with long nails, leaning over on the planet and trying to over the planet. Do you think Charlie Hebdo would be doing something illegal?
So first of all,
it's a simple question.
Okay.
Simple question.
Simple question. So simple answer.
Yeah.
They're not the same. The simple answer is one is you're ridiculing. Listen.
Yeah.
You're ridiculing the people, the Jewish people.
Okay.
One is you're ridiculing Jesus, something that exists in our imagination.
Right.
I
disagree with both. I think it's hypocritical.
Yeah.
I think it's hypocrisy. One you cannot do, one you can do. That's what we call hypocrisy and double standards.
You do it all the time.
You can.
You do it all the time. You say Jesus isn't the Son of God. How more insulting can you get?
I disagree with it.
Let me explain. I believe if you want to have absolute freedom of speech, which doesn't exist in any society on the planet, it has never existed in the real world.
None of us are advocating for that.
Wait, let me finish. Absolute freedom of speech doesn't exist. It's not real. It is not real. It doesn't exist. It has never existed. It doesn't exist in Britain today. There are things people cannot say in Britain today. If you were to say those things, you would be arrested. You would be put on trial. So we all agree that there is no absolute freedom of speech. Freedom of speech must be regulated. It must be limited. Not by me. Not by me. I agree again with Steve. Shake hands. Not by me. I'm not the authority. So who determines how far does freedom of speech go? Let me finish my point. Now, obviously, lawmakers in Britain and across the West have decided that anti-Semitism is illegal. It doesn't come under freedom of speech. It doesn't come. Likewise, I believe this law should be extended to other people. They should also be included. And we must limit freedom of speech in that sense.
So I just want to fact check you on one thing.
Again, to emphasize my point.
No, you're saying
I'm finishing right now. Last sentence.
Yeah, but Judaism is a race, not a religion, and two very different things.
That's a good question.
When you're a race, you can't decide or choose that. When you're a religion, you can choose that.
Judaism is a religion. Judaism is a religion. No. Jews are a race. Jews are a race. Judaism is a religion. And you can't insult both. You can't insult both. By the way, you can't insult any of them. You can neither insult Judaism nor the Jews. That's anti-Semitism. That's illegal in Britain. Rightly so. Rightly so.
Judaism.
Okay. I'm saying this law should be extended to others.
I'm sorry, you can insult Judaism.
Otherwise, it's hypocrisy.
Okay. Can I just fact check a few things?
Thank you.
Can I just fact check a few things? You seem to say that anti-Semitism is illegal, but being racist is legal. Being racist is just as illegal as being anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And it deals with the people, not the idea. And this is what you really struggle to separate.
So
let me just finish.
So you want to limit freedom of speech?
Let me finish. Yes.
So we agree.
Everyone agrees with that. We've said from day one.
Right.
Inciting
I agree.
violence.
So what is racism? What is racism? Primarily, what is it? Let's talk about racism.
Can I just finish my point instead of you dictating the debate? So all I'm trying to make is the very simple distinction. The simple distinction is you have people, and people can be vulnerable and can be harmed in this world, and you have ideas, religion, God. Every Muslim I know unreservedly will say that Jesus is not the Son of God.
That's not an insult.
For a Christian, that is. And it's way. Let me finish. To deny Jesus is a God is far more insulting than drawing a picture of Muhammad, who isn't God.
So we have to agree then.
According to you.
According to you.
There is the problem.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
So we have. Do you agree
I have a
then?
question now.
No, question to him.
Is it allowed in Britain to insult Judaism?
Yes.
No, it's not.
No.
It's illegal.
No, it's not.
It's illegal.
People
you don't know what you're talking about.
People criticize
Adnan. I said insult, not criticize. Again, let me clarify again for Joseph's convenience.
What's the difference?
We are talking about insulting, not criticizing. We are for, as Muslims.
For the cameras, you can insult Moses to the camera.
Okay, let me finish. Joseph.
No Muslim
we don't want to do that. Wait. As a Muslim, I am for criticizing religions.
Yeah.
You want to criticize Islam, do it day and night. We have no problem with that. Okay? You want to criticize Judaism? No. To us Muslims, no, it's not acceptable. Like it isn't in Britain today. Thankfully and rightly so. Likewise, it should not be allowed, like it isn't allowed to insult Judaism, it should not be allowed to insult other religions. This is why we believe in freedom of speech, which is regulated, which is limited, like it is in the case of anti-Semitism.
Which law?
And I'm being very consistent. Joseph is not for some reason.
Which law forbids you from insulting a religion?
Anti-Semitism.
No, anti-Semitism deals with the people.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, show me the law. You can't just say to the camera, I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. Because the UK has a tradition.
Can I write an article? Can I write an article?
Adnan, there is a show on Broadway at the moment called The Book of Mormon. Called The Book of Mormon. It ridicules and rips the Mormon faith. No one's getting arrested.
I believe that's wrong.
That's your opinion. That's not British law.
But
that's what you're confusing.
double standards.
And no,
that's double standards.
You're not understanding a basic premise of what we're talking about, which is ideas versus people. Me and you are people. Religion exists in the imagination.
Can we criticize or insult? Not criticize. We agree on criticism. Academics always do that. Can we insult Judaism in Britain?
Yes.
That's you don't know what you're talking about.
You can't.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Okay,
you don't know
for the camera. You explain to the camera how it.
Anti-Semitism.
That's for the
anti-Semitism.
People. Listen to me.
The legislation is that
listen
you cannot
to me.
insult the Jewish people.
Listen to me. Why do you think that Judaism you can't insult, but Mormonism you can?
Let me go to.
No.
Let me go to Sheikh Google and see what anti-Semitism is.
Yes.
So it'll be the IRA definition, which is all over the news.
Google.
From what I know, you can't depict Muhammad.
Yeah.
It's illegal to depict Muhammad.
No,
so we don't even know what Muhammad looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
So wait.
Sorry. We're not allowed to depict Muhammad in this country. Yes, we can.
No. So Muslims.
But I'm not a Muslim.
You're completely missing the point. Okay. You're missing the point. We don't know what Muhammad looks like. There's no stories, there's no evidence, there's no bread trail. There's no bread trail, right? There's no bread trail as to what Muhammad looks like.
The IRA definition is what you want.
Wait. Before I go to definitions, look, I put anti-Semitism in Google, and what came up? Articles. Chelsea face partial stadium closure if UEFA finds fans guilty of anti-Semitism. Wait, let me finish.
They turned up in a game with the Nazi Death Squad logos on. That's what that's talking about, Nazis.
And I agree, they should be banned. Such nasty people
but that's talking
should be banned. Wait, let me finish. Another headline from Jewish Chronicle, the newspaper, Labour official becomes first party employee accused of anti-Semitism, which is illegal in Britain. Chelsea condemn anti-Semitic chants in MOL VD Europe or league game or something. Now to the definition.
So I've got the definition here, so I've already preloaded it.
Oh,
So
okay.
the definition, which is accepted by the British government, is the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which has been all over the news because of Jeremy Corbyn's refusal to accept it. So it says, calling for, aiding or justifying or killing or harming the Jews, harming of the Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as power of Jews as a collective, such as especially, but not exclusively, the myth about the world Jewish conspiracy or Jews controlling the media, economy, government or other societal institutions, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoings committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews, denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, e.g. gas chambers, or intentionally of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the National Socialist Germany, the Nazis, and its supporters, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, accusing Jewish citizens. You see the trend. You see the trend. This is the definition that's accepted by the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, accepted by the Conservative Party.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is the focus, because anti-Semitism manifests in Israel. But we'll come back. It's going to distract us if we go Israel-Palestine. But there is an accepted definition, and it deals with the people, not the ideas. Okay. Ideas are free to criticism in terms of religion. I'm not a Muslim. I should be free to draw Muhammad.
Let's get more practical. Let's get more practical with this. Let's get more practical. If I was to pull out something from the Mishnah or from the Talmud, and I was to discuss it in public, and say the Jews believe in this, and therefore the Jews are likely to do that, and that particular criticism, which is not insult by the way, leads to the persecution of the Jewish people, right? Would that be allowed?
So I think that's a very, very strong argument. And so yes, I think if something is written in Jewish scripture, people should be able to present it to Jews and say, look, this is what your book says, and they should be able to spread that. However,
my question is not that. My question is something different. Is that allowed?
So
if it definitely leads to the persecution of the Jewish people.
If it's not fabricated and you're bringing something from Jewish scripture. So as an example, and I think it's better to deal with realities, in Judaism, when the Jews conquered the land of Israel, Joshua, there were people that were living there that were displaced and killed. There was a big war, and if a Muslim or a Christian or someone were to come and use this and say, look at what the Jews did back then according to their scripture, that you can't legislate against that because that's what the book says. There's a duty on the Jewish people and educated people to explain.
I'll give you a better example. I'll give you a better example. During the Middle Ages, the Jews were hunted throughout the West,
or
Western Europe, and Eastern Europe,
and further east, and the Muslim world.
Okay, let's talk about that. These are two different questions. The Jews in the West and the Jews in the East, as in the Muslim world. Okay, let's talk about it. First of all, the Jews were specifically or particularly hunted for their beliefs about Jesus Christ. The copies of Talmud were burnt in public. Okay, after the fourth Latin Council, 1215, right? When copies of Talmud were burnt because the Jews were accused of dicide, okay? Because there are passages in the Talmud that insulted Jesus and his mother. Okay, wait, I'm finishing my point. And based upon those examples, laws are made later on that such things cannot be done again. This is what anti-Semitism. You cannot use certain statements from the Talmud to demonize or dehumanize the Jewish people, that they are killed or they are persecuted. That would be called anti-Semitism. Likewise, a criticism or a insult or an insult of a religion in a way that it leads to persecution of the people and their destruction cannot be allowed. And this is why I'm saying, just like anti-Semitism does not come under freedom of speech, it's not a privilege. Okay. Islamophobia cannot be regarded as freedom of speech. Now, Islamophobia, who defines it is another good good question. We can go on and on and on. This is where we...
Can I respond? So
Anti-Semitism is to
okay,
commit a
no,
crime
sorry.
against the son of Sam.
Okay, fine.
Exactly. I agree.
Rabbi,
I agree with the rabbi.
Whatever. He's actually a rabbi, but he's but thank you, Hassan. Let me speak to these people. So what you described in the Talmud is very real. Not what was said, but the lies they said about it. They took passages of the Talmud that weren't about Jesus or Mary and said they were, and that led to Jews getting killed. Absolutely. And that comes back to what I was saying before. I was saying if somebody takes something and it's actually written there, like you can't legislate about people discussing what's written in a book. But so let's bring it back to Islam.
Yeah.
So because we're dealing with Judaism, in the same way that I can read verses in the Quran, and I can read things about, and we don't have to go into this, but slavery. And I say, actually, I think slavery is abhorrent. These Muslims, their religion, it legislates that slavery is okay, and I know Judaism, so it's not. If I were to say that, I should be free to say that because it's in the Hadith, it's in the Quran, and it's your duty as a scholar, or as not a scholar, to correct me. And I can be insulted.
Very good point. Let me come back on that. To make a statement that the Muslims or Muslim civilization had an institution called slavery or servitude is one thing. To say that Muslims are a bunch of slavers and they believe in slavery is a completely another statement. The first one, the former, is an academic opinion. Nothing wrong with that. The latter is dehumanization and leading to persecution. The latter is problematic. The former is perfectly valid. No problem with that.
Adnan.
This is where anti-Semitism, to say that the Jews believe in X, Y, and Z, is perfectly fine. To say that the Jews are a bunch of X, Y, and Z is a completely different statement.
This is the problem with your argument, because it stifles my ability to actually hold an opinion. So you said that if you were to say that Muslims were slavers, that's dangerous speech.
No.
Okay, so you say it
the
again,
Muslims are a bunch of slavers.
Okay.
Is current. Okay, are a bunch of slavers, and they believe in slavery, right? That's one statement. To say that the Muslim civilization had an institution called servitude and slavery is another statement.
So for me, let me be really specific. I say that Islam not only had an institution called slavery, Islam outlawed eating bacon. Yes. But it legislated for slavery. There are laws to do with you that make your slave woman pregnant. What happens? There are laws of whether
Judaism?
Yeah, I agree.
Like Judaism?
Yeah, Judaism has
like
slavery.
Christianity?
Exactly. And we have
Pharaohs. We've been enslaved for the pharaohs for thousands of years.
We don't have those institutions anymore, do we?
Yes, in some.
We don't.
Mauritania.
The Israelites
No.
enslaved by the pharaohs.
Is it allowed?
Brothers, the Israelites were enslaved by the pharaohs way before Islam.
Yes. We agree. But we
carry on with the brother. Carry on with the rabbi.
Everybody. So what I'm trying to say is,
so I think Joseph, I think we agree. We both agree in principle with each other. What we can't get to is how can I put it? The same understanding. We agree in principle. You agree that it should not be allowed to insult a people or a religion that leads to the destruction of those people. We agree, right? Right? Yeah. We, at the same time, we both agree that it should be allowed to criticize religions and persons. That doesn't criticism that doesn't lead to the destruction of a people. We both agree. Do we agree? That's it. So I believe such freedom of speech is perfectly allowed. In fact, I believe it's healthy for civilizations to flourish. The latter, where people insult or criticize in a way that leads to destruction of a people, is not allowed, should not be allowed, and it is barbaric and uncivilized.
Okay, and just to what the camera's
the conclusion is positive and good.
Wait. The conclusion is
the Jew and the Muslim agree.
Joseph.
Can I just one minute. No. Can I
clarify what you say? You said something.
I really want to make one final point. The cameras weren't here at the beginning, and it actually started with one of the issues we were discussing was drawing Muhammad.
Yes.
And so if my religion says that a Muslim cannot call my prophet Musa, yeah? Because that's really insulting for me. And a Muslim turns around and says, wait a minute.
But how does that lead to the destruction of a people?
Can I just, it doesn't, I'm trying to make a point.
Yeah.
And
that's fine.
No, let him give the example about Jesus when he said Jesus, Muslim, they don't believe he's God.
What I want to get, there is no prohibition in Judaism against drawing a prophet, against drawing your prophet.
That's fine. That's fine. No problem.
Actually, there may be some prohibitions in Jewish thought, depending who you follow for the camera, because I'll get fact checked otherwise. But there are definitely streams of Judaism where there's no issue drawing prophets. And if I want to draw Muhammad, I'm not a Muslim. I should be free. If you take offense at that, that's fine.
What if you draw is not him anyway?
You can be offended by me, and you can think I'm the scum of the earth for doing that.
But if
someone
draws,
in a free society, I should have the freedom to depict your prophet.
If you want to depict a prophet, which people have done in the past, you're perfectly allowed to do so. But if you depict our prophet, our prophet cannot be depicted, first of all, because no one knows what Muhammad looked like.
Same with Jesus, though.
First of all, exactly. So, no, wait. If you want to depict our prophet, imagine, in your imagination, with a bomb in his turban and publish it for people to see it, now you are actually dehumanizing the Muslims. And this is not racism, this is destruction of a people, a vulnerable people. This is not freedom of speech. This is uncivilized, barbaric fascism. Okay, this is where if you want to paint a prophet by your imagination, in a garb,
Muslim put a bomb in his turban, blow himself up. You do it in Iraq, you do it in Afghanistan, you do it, the Muslims to each other.
Wait. Are you a child killer? Are you a child killer? You're not. But there are Jewish soldiers doing it in Israel.
Defending our children.
Exactly. So I can't say the Jews are doing it. I can't say the Jews are doing it. I can't say the Jews are doing it. I can say some Israeli soldiers are doing it. That would be an accurate statement. Likewise, you can say some Muslims are doing stupid things, atrocities. I agree. So you can't make a general statement, you are doing it.
So
I'm not doing it.
Say that
I'm Muslim.
My name is Adnan. Adnan's
Rashid.
not bombed anyone. He's definitely not a suicide bomber because he stood in front of me. Or he's the worst suicide bomber ever. So I'm going to deal with the individual.
I don't even find that funny, but...
Joseph,
I'm saying that there are Muslims, just like you said, there are Jews that do bad things, there are Muslims that do bad things. You're not one of them. You're a sincere, a good-hearted person.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm not.
And so what I'm saying is we are not those. Deal with me.
I think we have, to end on a positive note, we have agreed in principle certain things that lead to the destruction of a people cannot be allowed in a civilized society. Okay, that cannot be regarded as freedom of speech because that's freedom to deconstruct or decimate a people. That's not freedom. That's barbarity. On the other side of the fence or the other side of the coin, if you want to criticize academically or in civilized, honorable language a people, a prophet, a figure, no problem with that. That's to be cherished. That's healthy for society.
With you.
Okay. But we have agreed, right? On a positive note, we end the discussion. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for all of your time. Thank you very much. Okay, whose mics are these? Thank you.
I would have to disagree. I would have to disagree with the fact that you said that.
Hold on.
The guy gets.
You're gonna get that.
See your log on.
No,
We're doing the awkward thing now.
Greeting, Rastafari.
Last year the first. Kings of kings and lords of lords. Real black man religion.
I know, that's it, right.
We got the vibrations. We're there. Fire ones. Rebel Lions. Well, we had I can't lie, it's negrophobia. The title of that one. Basically, Black Raven was talking to one of a Muslim brother about Adnan, and then Adnan was basically saying to him, what do you do for the community? And then Adnan said, oh, so you're exploiting the black community. You get me? So then he said, all right, cool. I'm gonna take this back and do the same idea with the Muslim community. So then Adnan, you get me? But he superimposed something negative on what Rat Raven doing, because he said Rat Raven was exploiting the black community. But yet you want to take the idea. You get me? A bit like G-Circle. Come on, we there. Yeah. So what man's saying is, for you to be able to take the idea to the Muslim community, which is no problem, but for you to superimpose something negative on what Rat Raven doing with the black community, that's negrophobia, cuz. You know what I'm saying, fam? So, we soon shoot the video about what? 15, 20 minutes.
I'm gonna bring out the light in and the Ronin.
I'm gonna bring the Ronin out, yeah? Alright, cool. But who's in there though? Where the fake? Where the 1-1
with Choki.
Got a Negro in a phobe today, you get me? Negro in a phobe. Negrophobia. You get me? Yeah, I'm gonna switch over to the grey one at one point as well. Mad thing.
I'm gonna do some more scouting in the corner.
Yeah, man, do your thing.
Some more scouting still. The N1. What's going on? Cool, fam. Respect.
Nice.
Grapple. Cool. Respect.
No, this is what needs to be done. Yeah, that was a good discussion. Yeah.
It's
also said he's the world on the road. No, according to the Quran, he is the world of Allah. He is the Messiah. And I'm telling you, your religion, you have no clue about your religion. Yeah.
You can make it up. I will make one up.
What's going on? You're good, fam.
Hey, what? This ain't our corner. Is this our corner?
Nah, but we're just getting it in still. It's the best corner right now, anyway.
So you're not. I'll go on now.
Ilford Essex. Ilford Essex now is an Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani area. Yes,
multiculturalism. They're not Jews.
My immigrant family came to this country in the 1880s. The Mile End Road, and the Whitechapel Road was Jewish.
Mostly rubbish.
Mostly banter.
Hey, bro, how you doing?
Good, you got your cap on today. I'll give you a record.
Hello,
I'm
Mr.
trying to
Propaganda
hide
King.
Leo,
that's
this is
mine.
How are you?
my
Right,
French,
yeah,
my
good to
French.
see you, man.
How's it going,
Just banter, man. Just a little bit of banter.
He's getting too famous now.
Always
COE.
smiling. I like that about this guy.
That is the good thing about this guy, is he smiles.
I'm live stream.
It's a live stream now.
We're just talking about
What are we talking about? Well, the heartbreaker man.
You.
He's a heartbreaker.
We're talking about you.
What do we say about him? What do we think about him?
Oh, you got your own.
Good man, good man.
the best. COE the best. We say no tolerance. What you want?
Don't get big head now. Don't get big head.
Say what going to Raj, innit?
Be nice. Do not say anything. Do not say anything.
Raj. What can we say about Raj?
No, nothing about Raj.
Raj,
say nothing about Raj.
Improve your diet. Stale bread and baked beans. It's doing you no favours. It's making you go doolally. All the live streams. It's not good for you.
Who's that?
Get out of the pigeon coop. Get out of the pigeon coop.
Wait, stop.
Who's random exposure?
Who are you?
I'm nobody, man. I'm anonymous.
With a hoodie. Yeah.
Back soon.
Anything interesting going on today?
I want to give him an interview.
Do you?
I'm
What
going to give him
about?
one.
What about?
My speaker school, the same one that I've been asking everybody. Innit? Yeah. We saying you ain't ready for yours though?
Soon.
Promise. Tomorrow never comes.
Tomorrow comes.
Tomorrow never comes.
Soon. Maybe tonight.
Cool, man.
We're going to stick around for a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a group
Respect,
one.
respect.
All right, Chris, you good?
I'll go on, William.
How's it going, man?
Right. Cool, yeah, bro.
It's good, it's good.
Right.
What was that? You had a little row earlier?
What are you talking about?
So we'll be talking economics for about 2 hours or something.
Exactly, yeah.
Economics, man, for a change.
Managed to keep religion out of it.
Yeah, we kept religion out of
most
it.
of the time, yeah. So
Yeah, European Union economics. That shit.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
so
exactly. EU, feature of the EU or whatever, yeah.
You said with immigration,
did you go down last week to
the Robinsons?
Yeah.
I was at the start of it because it was just over there on Park Lane, innit?
Yeah.
I let them march off and the rest left.
What happened with them? Did I march? I don't know.
Brexit means Brexit.
Ah, right. It was like 3,000 people.
No,
I see.
last 2 years.
But yeah, the counter demonstration, the momentum official figures they said in the paper, there was 15,000 people apparently there. I see, there was like a couple of, like 100 people or something. Well, I don't know, but it was tiny. It was pathetic. There's footage of them giving the speeches, and this woman's like, "Can you hear me at the back?" And it's like a little golf club, like someone at a Monday night comedy gig or something. You know what I mean? It's like, I reckon that was supposed to like outnumber that what the other march like 5 to 1.
Fucking.
So yeah, it's,
Cool, I'm gonna walk around still.
And how does your...
Go on, Tiger.
Easy.
Good year, fam.
I said so. Self-evident.
Let me check the camera.
Always depend on circumstances, yes. For example, the revolt in France over the last weeks. How a lot of people who want to be objective, outside, non-committal,
Respect 1-1 for the cutting out. Well gone, Ash.
So what, you can sort yourself right there?
well, brother, you good?
That's it.
That was the day I was talking about. No one is on the Ferris wheel. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, everyone's gathered around our corner conversation. Quite look empty otherwise, fam. Mad thing.
Anyone anti-black? I want to take it up. How can my agenda?
No, but you can't.
I've spoken to him before. Have I? I'm saying, me and Rachel. Have we exchanged numbers? So what I'm trying to say is, what you're saying, don't worry about it.
I'm asking a question. Like you just said. I'm asking a question.
I'm asking a genuine question. You know everything you've done to him, I've done it to him. Everything you've done to him, I've done the same to him. It's just a question. Oh, you said something else? Okay.
Hey, Behaviour, respect, bro. Well, D ran up on me today already still. I'm well wanting to do something still. Yeah, I'm going to give him an interview. Serious one. In a hype thing. Oh God, what are you talking about?
About Somalis.
It's crazy what I'm talking about. You talk about what is it, Somali corner.
Yeah, what are they talking about?
It's why some Somali. He's saying some Somalis don't claim the black.
What are they talking about?
Debating about that.
A lot of things we do know. Huh? A lot of things. Maybe short list, roughly. I'm trying to work out where to hang out.
Do you want to listen to Paul and Lizzie?
Have you read the Quran then?
You're being facetious to me.
He's facetious. You saw God in the Bible. Why do you call me good? And
Jesus doesn't. Have you read all the different versions of the Bible?
Why do you call me good? I'm quoting your own Bible. So she acknowledges in your Bible, he makes a racist.
Hey, what's my name started? You man ain't started all corner.
Let's do good, bro.
Like I said, I can answer for him in a certain degree.
I'll use the main camera for that anyway.
Yeah, I know.
You go taking some of this.
Surah 96, all it does to confirm Allah's knowledge was very bad. Allah tells Muhammad, read. What Muhammad turns and does, I don't know how to read. Allah doesn't even know. This so-called Muhammad, last prophet, example to mankind, can't even read. Shame on Allah. Surah 1 is the eternal prayer of Allah.
He was illiterate.
Allah didn't know Muhammad could not read. Shame on Allah.
Hang on.
So,
Can I
why?
answer that?
No, so
Because this is a false accusation. It's definitely false accusation. When angel came to him, he said, recite.
Big up Hatton, use a lover voice, me too.
He said, I'm going to recite it.
You said read 2 minutes ago. You said read 2 minutes ago. It's on camera. You said read. That exactly this one. Exactly this one.
I said read and recite both.
No, you said read.
This is the camera. I said read and recite both.
How can you read?
I said read and recite both. I didn't say Quran means read or
Yeah,
recite.
you backtracked now, yeah?
I did.
So there is
Read and recite. So don't lie.
Actually, it is read
Be a
or
Christian.
recite.
Try to be honest.
Because Quran is well detailed, well explained. Allah cannot even communicate if it is Ikra or not. Here's the problem. My problem still stands. Since Muhammad Hijab confirmed that Allah prays, soon after that debate, all I am curious, who does Allah pray to?